Na nungu ware tu na kau au se pamariketa na dona ngauna. Na mai na ngauna undur tu kinango. Lu na longo ni reda na bika. Sa yadu tu ina bunua o anda pamariketa. Bisa lalima na bunua mera bading kina na ika sa salu waitui. Pabibi na lase, bunua erando tengu erapa, tengu kina na ika, na bukunondra pura-pura. Yun ang ni kuwa, tarayo wale buni ureda na una ke may mandong kulikinelyu sa tebume yalimai. Yalimai na bika ki may mandau pamargatu na nganyiliu.
Asin ba kailiu? Dala ka nung andaredir na ika ng bulan-bulan ni lase. Kaya nare-review na ka to na waituin na lase. Ano ni ko siya nga? Ngay ba sa bakila chuko may andala ka ni bango? Sa lebo na zo eratui. Sa raumbia to na lase. Niyo. Sa ba kami mate may na niyo. Sengo na ya senga. Re-review na ka to na waituin na ika.
Fiji is known as one of the soft coral capitals of the world and considered to have some of the best dive sites on the planet. But in many parts of its over 300 islands, the corals are dying, and the fish, shellfish, and other seafood and marine life that need the coral to survive and thrive are diminishing.
Sabu kaya ndrabu may na waitui sa sang sudsar ni lebu naka mepakana nugu sela kumaya
Votua village sits on one of Fiji's most famous tourism hotspots, the Coral Coast. But here, corals are dying. And the people who have lived on this coast for decades or all of their life say the coral and the reefs are not what they once was. Ilimeleki Turangarongo is a Turanganikoro or village headman of Votua village.
Na lasi mandangan lango na singe tumuto kumikina. Baki walu melo me baya. So mga na redetun do na longon sin ka ubna kana redebina kan lasi. Di rokan lasi. Pata na ika. Inda nunutuan ibang anda sa biklitu na ika nonra sinti kawite kena na tamata. Ramano binagatu na ika. Ira tuatunira sini apalaki. Itu binitungan na kiandra na nonra bale na nonra guni-guni. Yani mbula binagatu na lasi. Dui roka. Lasi sa singasaragan nito na lasi mbula. Sa turan yung mbula tu ako na batu kola batu lo limatangal batu ratui lo mani waitui. Kola lasi o kana lasi tu mana utala tingo. Wali lisar.
Sera mbula-mbula binakana lase sera lebu na lase rambula go sandala ko ngo sa lebu na lase saramati tu.
The destruction and death of coral is one of the most serious threats that has affected the entire marine ecosystem of Fiji. Some of it has been caused by coral bleaching due to global warming and climate change. But overfishing, pollution, and poor fishing habits have contributed immensely. Reef ecologist Dr. Victor Bonito was one of the first to notice the phenomenon in Fiji over 20 years ago.
All around the Fiji group, we found reefs that have been heavily impacted by coral bleaching. Many areas have shown resilience where the corals have recovered. It takes time, but in some places, even before the corals recover, they get hit again. And this is the challenge, is even in the best managed reefs, reefs that haven't been overfished, that don't have any land-based pollution, the frequency of disturbance from coral bleaching is happening more frequently. Here on the Coral Coast, reef areas that have been overfished have never recovered from the 2000 bleaching. The ecosystem was already out of balance, and once the hot water came in and wiped out the remaining corals, these areas have never recovered. And that's the real challenge, is that local stressors keep increasing and increasing, and the frequency and intensity of coral bleaching is increasing. And I think there's very few reefs that we'll find around the Fiji group that still look like they did in the 70s, 80s, even early 90s.
Dr. Bonito lives right next to Votua village and is the director of Reef Explorers Fiji.
Well, corals are the foundation species of the reef. They not only build the structure that's home to all the life on coral reefs, but living corals themselves attract a lot of life. A lot of small fish, crabs, invertebrates that live in and around the corals that are food for the bigger fish that many communities seek to live to harvest off of the reef. Okay? The food security that we look for on coral reefs is largely based around the amount and the health of the coral that we have on our reefs.
With the support of students from the universities of Alabama and Delaware, Dr. Bonito is leading a coral revival by undertaking research to identify coral that is tolerant to heat.
So here we're doing thermal stress testing of corals. These are corals taken off the reef here, all of the same species. In this tank, they're at an ambient seawater temperature of 28 degrees. And this tank, we're pumping up the temperature to 36 degrees to see how do these corals perform under heat stress. This is part of research that we are doing in partnership with University of Alabama and University of Delaware to try to develop novel technologies for identifying the most heat-tolerant corals on the reef. These heat stress tests will be combined with a fingerprinting with a light device called a fluorometer that shoots light at the coral and looks at what reflects back, and we get a fingerprint from that, and combined with also samples of the coral that we use genetics to look at the symbionts inside. And these data together help us to put together a model for this device so we can use it without knowing anything about the coral to predict that whether it will be good under heat stress and into the future with climate change, or it's going to be a bad performer, one that's likely to die when there's a lot of heat stress. In here are some of the corals that we've been working with this same project last year, and we're setting them up on these pucks and taking their weight and taking pictures around them so that we can figure out the volume and area and weight of them and track their growth rate over the year. We want to understand whether or not corals that are more thermally tolerant have a trade-off, that maybe they grow slower or are less productive in their growth than corals that are more prone to heat stress.
And we've been seeing that even some of the healthiest, most protected reefs, where fishing hasn't taken place for 20 years, we can still see that the corals there are heavily impacted by climate change. Our first bleaching event was in 2000 in Fiji. That wiped out a lot of corals all around the Fiji group. And subsequently, we've had several mass bleachings around the Fiji group, and it's almost becoming an annual event. Not necessarily at every reef site, but almost every year we can find serious bleaching occurring somewhere around the Fiji group.
But research alone is not enough. Changing lifestyles, pollution, economic activities that destroy and disturb the environment are causing a huge burden.
Overharvesting. As populations have grown, there's more demand for marine life and food from the sea. Our reefs have not gotten any bigger while our populations have grown, and that's led to people overharvesting. As we remove certain species from the ecosystem, it disrupts the balance of what's there.
Okila nambinu tu chukuni waitui. Ina nambinu sa libu na binu rala ko chukur le duka kinana mati kinana lasi. Yuko sa riza sarana lasi. Ya sara tumbu kinana dina mati bago sa da reza wala ngan brown tumena dele ni iliu sesenga. Ribina katumena lasi bulan ni bulatu. Yuko sa senga sa libu ngana so sa tu dile ni la sengur.
Sara sini ngole bunga mai nai kamera mai kiko kina. Eda buksaka ni kela sa benudi na nonre kana bune merambula kina. Yado mana ngone ni kua. Saruta me wasaba tungo na drose ni mai nai kamera lago mikina. Isa o tsara bi kona lasi. Na buktalinga ni wai lago mai dalana. Kota buta mai na kausa ti tu mendalana lago tu mai no wani mati mai buza ko tota na ndoni ko ya lo mani wai rangi ko su mai no wai wetu lo una me lega kina na lasi.
The ocean is the receiving environment. So tourism development on land or other development on land where we're clearing and we have mud that ends up in the sea, forestry, logging up in the watershed comes out and directly impacts the reefs. Particular fringing reefs like the one behind us here that's right adjacent to the land. Also wastewater and other things from development, particularly in rural areas where we don't have reticulated wastewater systems that are supported from government infrastructure. All those nutrients and things seep out to the sea, and all these things are helping to degrade the reef.
Changing lifestyles are leading to neglect and lack of respect for the oceans and reefs.
Mami liu mami suka mana buli wai. Suka mana buli le baba ni wai le siwa le nunu. Ngone kua. Sara longa mai sara senikla la kui wai. Sara tombal tunga takatunga nambara bingo ngon sala. Tali mon da kavira mera ingoli mera siwa satu tali mana kini sau sa senga bira na elu ni barongo na ngoni ku bai boki me mina ngoni maya mo zingi bosa bondo na otami ki me ka bongo ki me ka
Sara senga talangan ni pakai liwe meran daw la ko wetu ye meran Borobo na ngone ni kua sa senga dende ni bula saran dende non la ko talinga witu ina na di bukan on tu
Bunga na sara teleboni.
sa lebunga na taleboni onge rede ni kua no tangane ke indona marame me labeta chukuna kuro ala be pata chukuna lingana na taleboni nge tebi beni kana talenga talebun tale chunga dona lingana
salibuna kambula sa yalta ni mai na bonongo don me viso matikina na amule lomo ni wai tamata kena mon man sa babu ni tiko na dona tamani dona lengal kena seni maru ibina kana na bibi nambin na kain dambin na tamata na unikau na kai mbiwo na unikau wana ndonikau na one mate buza ngai lomni wai kena weida lokani bi kenda na tamata na bi wale na unikau le saranda mai mbotini sa seni bese mati binakina na bikabula wai ebonu.
Well, I think there's a lot of things that are taking place in Fiji, both to help our reefs recover as well as to maintain the resilience of Fijian coral reefs. One of the most important ones is the management work that's taking place by many local communities all around the Fiji group, often with support from NGOs. These are the development of LMMAs, or what we call locally managed marine areas. This generally involves areas that are no-take or tambu areas where fishing is prohibited to help maintain reproductive stocks of fish as well as healthy marine life for reproduction and supplying the areas around. But also some other rules and regulations put in place by communities to try to prevent the overfishing of the areas where they do continue to fish.
People and groups are stepping up. But is this enough? The survival and flourishing of coral is not only vital to the livelihoods of many Fijians, it is critically important to sustain the country's tourism industry, one of its main economic earners and drivers.
Tourism is the bread and butter of many Coral Coast communities, both in providing job opportunities, lease monies to landowning units, as well as job opportunities and economic opportunities to people who operate tours and transport and other things around our tourism industry. If guests come and there's not a living, healthy reef to snorkel on, they'll go look for somewhere else to go for their holidays. And that really will diminish the economic opportunities that local communities have. Really, the health of our reefs, meaning the health of the corals on our reef, really drives the economic opportunities and food security that they can provide to the local communities. So as the reefs become degraded, the opportunities and these things fade away with the health of the reef.
While some reefs and spots in Fiji are struggling, in others they are thriving. Divers from all over the world continue to flock to Fiji, which is some of the best rated dive sites internationally.
Well, Fiji certainly has some spectacular dive sites and some great diving here. Fiji's known as the soft coral capital of the world in the dive industry, not just because of the diversity of soft corals we have here, but the abundance of them. Hard corals as well. I think the Rainbow Reef and the Great White Wall and many places around the Fiji group have world-class diving and have been like that for 20 or more years. Similarly, our tourism industry, a lot of it is based around surfing. And as you know, the surfing is also a very important component of marine sports that take place on coral reefs. It's the coral that builds these structures and that shape the waves that come in. So,
Fiji's beautiful marine and coral life are natural treasures that we must all work together to nurture and look after for future generations.
Kira bikin nina kangkung baleta na non rambula na lasi me waitui o kira me maroroi na waitui baleta na vano rambula kina na ika kiri talenga kuni sala kuni bayang ataka nan tuba era mate kina na kalalai ni le siwa tanga maira na kalilibu ni ka kwani bayang ataka nan tuba kerkere ni ka kwani benuza talenga na wai mbatana na lasi saranda reza saralai mate kina na lasi liu siri rebina katu na lasi ni rambula binakatu ni kuasa asenga
sa nuku tatau tale bikemni ikaw ko ni benuda na nung ngoli sa ko na ngoli wasivia abang kini nduba kina ngoli ba rika ngoli wasivia sando lang ngai wain da ngoli ba mana karin da ba ngata na lo min don singa asa rauta nda bina nimitiko na bukunonda tiko tano nimiro na sebera mai Berin radio talenga na pinaka na katali ang bulan na kalu. Nanda ba nga tawa tayo na bura-bura. Kaning goli-goli ang dapat kanikina.